Today is March 5th, 2025. My name is Maya Kelly, and I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia at the Virginia Tech University Libraries. Joining me for an interview today is, could you please state your full name?
Penny Lee Deere.
Do I have your consent to record this interview?
You do.
Just to let you know, part of the process, we can pause or stop at any time. You don't have to answer questions that you don't want to answer. You will have the opportunity to review this recording and make any necessary changes to the final record. Okay, to start off, what were the dates of your military service?
I went on active duty November 7th, 1975 to 1 December 1995. However, I was in the delayed entry program. My first in the senior class, I signed up in April the 7th, 1975.
Did you deploy to a war zone and did you serve in combat?
I did. In 1990 and 91, I was in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and yes, I was in combat.
Do you have access to the Veterans Affairs Services?
I do. I use it. That's the only doctors I use.
Would you mind telling me about your time and your experience during Desert Storm?
Absolutely. It's quite extensive, actually. So I was in military intelligence. I worked for the 7th Corps Commander. That's a very large unit. They have divisions, probably 10 divisions. I'm just throwing those numbers out. And so each one of those divisions, say, has 10,000 troops or maneuvers. But my job was military intelligence, so I was supposed to know what the enemy was doing. Somebody else had the job of knowing what the friendlies were doing. And so those are foes, we call them. But the significant thing about that is right before I was deployed to the desert, my job was exactly the same thing, watching the enemy, only it was the Warsaw Pact. It was actually USSR, back when they had all those satellites. You had Mother Russia and all those satellites. It was whatever was left over from World War II. And I basically watched, you had Soviet units that were still stationed behind the Iron Curtain. So Poland and Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Hungary, they all had occupied forces. And then they had their own forces, but they were communists. So that was my job. And so I can tell you everything you need to know about those forces. And then in August of 1990, Iraq invades Kuwait. And basically, my take on it is we were looking out for the underdog, and we went to the coalition forces went to their aid and we took care of it. So I was military intelligence, and so my job was to figure out, it's kind of like a puzzle piece. I was an intelligence analyst, it's 96 Bravo, so it's putting a puzzle together. So I'm not the one that's actually doing the intelligence gathering. I'm taking all that intelligence and figuring out what's really happening. So for example, if there was 100 tanks in a motor pool or on the desert ready to deploy, and they're all lined up and ready to go one day, and then the next day when somebody flies over like some type of aircraft imagery, it's not there anymore. So where'd they go? What are they doing? Or when you see those same tanks and they're all in line formation or a diagonal formation, they're on the attack. So that's imagery. You have signal intelligence where you listen to communications. Other people are doing this, but they send me a report that this is what they heard. Interrogations, actually interviewing people firsthand. For instance, if they became POWs, they actually interrogated folks. And that happened a lot in Desert Storm. It was a mass. You have command and control. There's a lot that goes on when somebody's on the attack. So I put all that together, and it was a whole team. And my job was to brief the 7th Corps commander every morning on what he could expect. So if you think about that, that's a real burden. What happens if I gave him wrong information? So one of the things I talked about, when you have a tank coming at you, they're on the attack, you want to send another tank or you want to send an Apache helicopter. If you have infantry soldiers on the ground or they're in armored personnel carriers, then you would send similar forces. So I think that's enough for now, unless you have specific questions regarding that.
What was the most memorable experience during your time
In Desert Storm,
in your service total?
well, going to war was pretty significant. For a couple of reasons. Some things you wouldn't even think of. It's a nasty ass place. You can't keep clean. Sand's everywhere. I personally have sand pellets in my lungs still today because you breathe this stuff in. They set the oil fields on fire, so you're breathing in all that smoke and petroleum. But I had 2 children, and I had to send them home. Luckily, I had parents that would take them, and I had siblings that would take good care of them. I left them for a year to go to war, and luckily, I was able to come back. It was first in, first out, and afterwards, we see Iraq and Afghanistan. These folks rotated through, too many times. So I was very fortunate for that. So it's a combination of, it's one thing to go to war, but then the other thing about that was when we first got into country, I was stationed in Saudi Arabia, 70 kilometers from the Iraq border. But when I first got there, me being a female, they think very differently about females. You've seen the people with I can't pronounce their names, the ones that they're completely covered in black and the only thing you see is their eyes. They literally, the Saudis expected us to cover our faces, for us to dress like them, for us not to be able to drive our own vehicles. And I don't know exactly how it all came about, but they told them to go pound salt. These people are soldiers, and they're going to do their job. But, I mean, it's a culture shock that you're not seen as an individual. And here I am helping you because, it's only a matter of time. They took out Kuwait. If you don't stop them, they're going to be in your country. Do you want help or not? So, does that sound familiar, what's going on right now with Ukraine and Russia? Yeah. Okay.
Well, going off of what you said, what other prejudices, I guess, did you experience as a woman during your time in the service?
I think for the most part, I think I was very fortunate. But I can talk to different things that went on. So when I first joined, I was in the Women's Army Corps. We were completely segregated. I joined up for that service. So I wasn't allowed to be married. I wasn't allowed to have children. It was forbidden. If you happen to get pregnant by some way, it was the woman's fault, and she was discharged. She was actually given personality type disorder discharges. So it was a dishonorable discharge. They have special codes. So that's it didn't happen to me. I played by their rules. But I know too many people who are currently today, however long ago that is, 50 years, that are still trying to get their discharge upgraded. And somebody's finally listening. They're finally getting recognized that this is an issue. And then, of course, I'm sure with many interviews you're going to be talking about military sexual trauma. And it's an ongoing thing. It's been going on forever. I was in 75, but it went on before. And that's a very big umbrella. Military sexual trauma does not necessarily mean that you were raped or gang raped. It's when a man comes up to you or he nudges you, deliberately touches your breast, grabs your ass, that's disrespectful. It's uncalled for. And then nobody does anything about it. That was your original question. What was the prejudice? It was swept under the rug. If people try to make waves, I can tell you that people have woken up dead. You find people in the barracks who something happened to them mysteriously. A lot of times they say it was suicide. I don't believe it. I think a lot was covered up. So it's a catch-22. Do you report? Are you going to be recognized for that? Are you certainly not? When was going through this whole process, I had soldiers that worked for me, and of course I worked for somebody else, right? So you had that. So I felt when I didn't report my particular incident because I didn't want my subordinates not to respect me, that I was a tattletale, so to speak, kind of thing like that. And then I also did not feel that I would be heard or it would do me any good, that nothing would happen to that individual. So I kind of got him back in a different way. And I can elaborate that. It's kind of interesting, but I don't know if you want to take that time. So I didn't think the command was going to support me, and so I did not report at that time. So let me see if I can give you some brief. I do a lot of creative writing, and so this is fresh in my mind. Things like, it might not seem very like, what's the big deal, the kinds of things I'm about to say, but these people are the same people that I'm going to war with, that I'm going to be in that foxhole with. So there's these seeds that are planted that you are not safe. Okay, so I'm about to deploy to Desert Storm, Desert Shield. We're responsible for vehicles. We have to maintain them and get them ready. They actually went with us. That was our office, a 5-ton expandable van. And I would hear comments like, I'd like to check her oil with my dipstick. Things like that. It was just constant. And then when I said something to one of my peers, like that I was feeling uncomfortable, wasn't sure if I wanted to report it. What he said to me, he thought he was being supportive of me, but what he said was, if you don't report it, you're going to find yourself upside down in a foxhole. So it was another seed that I didn't need. Thank you very much. But anyways, there was all kinds of innuendos or simple little things, like if you're eating an ice cream and the way you're actually licking the ice cream, they made it into a sexual thing. There was no, nobody told them no. So it actually came up the other day. I don't know if I want to, I gladly tell the story, only I'm not so sure about the taping part. If you don't like it, take it out, okay? Well, anyway, just the other day, we were doing a drama piece. And so this one of the veterans in our Arts for Vets was pretending to be the man in charge, a colonel, okay? And then so I was playing his cadet or his underlinging of something. And he said, I had a bunch of details, and he said, so when I'm all finished with the detail I was supposed to be doing, he says to me, out of the clear blue sky, now I work with this guy all the time, but he was in character. And he said, before you go, I have a little something for you. And he goes like this, and he opens up his pants and actually starts to unzip himself. I went off. I didn't take it lightly. I said, you're way out of line here. I know we're doing drama, but no, this is unacceptable. And then I went on to tell him that I actually don't have it on today, but I wear a rubber band on purpose for when some person like that does that to me, or if I was attacked, I would use that rubber band as a weapon, and he would no longer have his set of genitals. Mm-hmm. And I let him know that. So it's still existing today, and I've been out since 1995. Mm-hmm. So nothing's changed. No. It was so easy for him to go into that character. So, but it also, like how fast I snapped. It was like, but I didn't step down. It wasn't like the submissive thing that was back in 1990 when it happened to me. So.
I would love for you to elaborate more on what you mentioned earlier about, I guess, what has changed over time. Like, then they wouldn't speak up about those things that were going on. behind the scenes, but now
I don't
they
think
are.
anything's changed.
You don't think anything?
It's being brought to light now after we're out of service. People are actually coming forward and getting service connection for military sexual trauma, but it might have happened, years ago. In my case, it was 1990, and I finally reported in 2013 to the VA. So I personally don't think anything's changed. They tried to change, it's called the UCMJ, where they took it out of the military's hands, that it would go into a civilian sector. I don't know as that's really, I can't see anything changing. One of my folks from Albany is coming down on Friday, and she's actually just told me her daughter is in the Navy. And she was having trouble with somebody stalking her. And she did report it to his command. And she told me that he basically, so far, what they've done is done like a restraining order. Like he didn't get in trouble. He didn't lose any stripes. He didn't, no restriction to duty. So I don't think anything's changed. And so what I told her to tell her daughter was, she's not safe. Don't ever be alone.
Going off of that, then, what would you say to women going into the service today?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I'm all for it. Don't let them win. It's unacceptable. My daughter actually, she was an Army brat, so she traveled with me for the 20 years. Well, it would have been 13 of her life, and my son was 18. And they're Army brats is what they're called. But anyway, she joined the Army. And I definitely made sure that she always had a battle buddy, they're called, where you're always in 2 or 3 at a time. It can be a guy. It doesn't matter. You just don't be alone. Don't be vulnerable. Don't put yourself in positions. Because one of the things that they say, and I'm sure you've heard it on college campuses, well, she was asking for it because she dressed up for you, and she wanted a nice skirt, looked nice, and it's her fault because you didn't know how to behave. So let me think if I got did I answer the question?
Yes, I think so. So what effects did your military experience then have on your personal relationships with your family members and your children?
Well, my family members don't get me. When you get out of the service, we speak a different language. You try to reintegrate to act like a civilian. It's really tough, especially when you've done 20 years. I was a senior in high school when I joined, and so I was 39 years old and a mom with 2 children, so that was my life. And so making the transition, and so civilians as a whole, and my family goes right along with it, is that they just don't understand. They don't want you to talk about what you did. They don't want you to, it's like you're supposed to just pick up where you left off and, become somebody else, relearn how to be a civilian. And you'll see that a lot with the different interviews that you do. And it's one of the major reasons for suicide, because we were part of a team. And when you get out, you no longer have a team. So one of the things that I actually did was I created my own team. I get my services from the VA, and there were alternative therapies at the VA. So creative writing, drama, music, dance, all those kind of things. A lot in the medical field, you do 12 sessions or 16 sessions, and then it's done. So when it was done in the VA, what do I do now? I actually I got more out of it, say music, listening to a song that would bring me to tears, than having talk therapy, where you just, you talk and these people don't care. Somebody fresh out of college, and I'm spilling my guts out, and they really don't care. Or they're reading from a book that she didn't meet this criteria, so therefore she doesn't have PTSD. That happened to me, actually. It took me years to get my diagnosis. And I can go into that in a little bit. But let me think. So what happened was, in 2016, I no longer had any of those services. I was going 4 days a week to the VA for these services. All of a sudden, I have no place to go. So I got mad. And I said, me and there's 2 other people that used to come on Tuesdays. We said, well, let's just meet for coffee. We don't have to do anything. And then it just grew from there. And now I am one of the lead facilitators for, it's called Support Our Troops Committee Arts for Vets. And we became a member of the American Legion, which is a huge organization nationwide. But we are a committee within that organization. So I now have a team. I built my own team, because I saw that there's something missing. In fact, it just recently happened. Was I did this since 2016, and I said, it's time for somebody else to take this over, right? And then I said, well, Penny, what are you going to do now? Like, aren't you like shooting off your own foot? So now, what did I say I would come back to?
Your PTSD diagnosis.
Okay. When I first got out of the military, well, first of all, alcohol in the military is a terrible issue, mainly because you blow off steam and that's what you do is drink. So you might take your subordinates out to the NCO club, or your boss might take you out, but was kind of expected to you after you got off at 4:30, 5 o'clock on a normal, just regular day. You might end up, having a couple beers. So after 20 years, or I didn't stop having the beer once I got home with the kids, I continued on. Anyway, I like my beer still today. However, I recognized that it was an issue, that I was going to get out in 1995. And so a year out, I went to my first sergeant and I said, what is it to get into these programs such as AA, or they had track 1, 2, and 3. And so I started the program to detox. All that meant, in my case, I elected to go to group therapy kind of thing, and then I didn't drink for a year before I got out of the service on purpose, because I did not want to be one of those people at the VFW that drank themselves to death they don't last. I think it's like somewhere between 15 months to 22 months, people die after drinking themselves to death or by suicide, because we didn't transition right. So the PTSD piece. I never even realized it was an issue until my daughter was in a car accident, and everything came up for me. So in my case, I have complex PTSD. So there's a lot that happened in my childhood, and I can whine about that all day long, but it's significant. But every time you have a trauma, everything builds on another trauma. So it's complex. So for the VA's purposes, it was combat-related trauma and military sexual trauma. And then, remember I told you that I was responsible for telling the general what to do. I caused a lot of deaths, a lot of destruction, and that's the moral injury that comes along with that. So it all just hit me like a ton of bricks. So in 2003, I started reaching out for the VA. Now, I retired in 95. So that was a long time. I didn't need a VA. I didn't need anything. I was good to go. I was a lean, mean fighting machine. And anyway, so I finally reached out, and it wasn't a problem getting the services. Well, this is what happened was, I'm in Albany, that's a teaching hospital. Stratton VA is a teaching hospital. So you'd have these doctorate students. And so you'd work with that doctorate students for a year. And then they rotated out. So I would go once a week, spill my guts out for a year, and then they just left me. So this went on for, I think, 13 years. I had 13 therapists in 13 years, and finally somebody said, this is ridiculous. Somebody who'd been a psychiatrist who had been there, she said, I'm taking your case. This is ridiculous. And she was with me for 3 years. She just retired. And then I ended up getting another person for, however, I'm losing track of my time now, but I had somebody else for stability for about 3 years too. So you can build rapport and really work on the underlying issues, so it affects my life all the time. I'm actually patting myself on the back that I drove here from New York. I elected to do that over like an extra period of time, spending the night, have regrouping every day, making a mini vacation of a sorts, because I'm notorious, and I'm not the only one that says I'm going to sign up for something, and then I ain't doing that today. I was I was not sleeping well right before I came, and my husband says, "Why are you doing this to yourself? Don't go." He was trying to let me off the hook. And I'm like, that's not the way to do business, you know? But so I forced myself. Like doing this now is very natural to me, talking. But getting here was the thing, you know? Or when I came today, just being on this campus, it's like a city. So I was having a minor meltdown. Luckily, I came before everybody else. I do it on purpose. I took a walk around, and I was getting a feel for it and stuff like that. So yeah, I try to be as prepared. I go through all kinds of stuff. They're called triggers in my case. Like, do I have my water? I'm a big water drinker. I drink a lot of water. Um, do I have snacks? Where's the toilet? And I wanted to drive myself. I didn't want to have somebody else with me saying that, why do we have to stop every 45 minutes for you to go to the bathroom, right? So I made a plan. Basically, it's like going to war. So,
What do you think restrained you from reaching out to the VA sooner?
because I was strong and there was nothing wrong with me. And in the military, you don't go on sick call. You suck it up. And so I was actually really thinking about this. Basically, I was brainwashed. A lot of people that you'll be interviewing will have a different perspective than where I come from. I think the difference is they might have done 2 or 3 years where I did 20. So you have to be deprogrammed. It's almost like being in a cult, if you think about it. I've been doing this whole process that I've been working on has brought up a lot of things. So I still have my mental health provider.
What do you think the transition to civilian life was like for you?
Actually, I thought I was doing pretty good. I did go back to, well, what I did was I made a plan, like I said, a year out, that I knew that I was going to be staying at. I was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia, was outside of Augusta, Georgia, where the golf tournaments is. And so I liked the climate, so I was going to stay there. And I actually spent 8 years after retirement there. So basically, I just went out and I used my GI Bill and went to school. And that's a whole nother story that's kind of interesting. But so I was in military intelligence, and one would think that I'm fairly smart in order to do that. Well, I went directly from a full-time job in the military to full-time student at age 39. Failed first semester. The big difference is when you have college in the military, you do part-time 1 or 2 college classes. You'll never get a degree. But anyway, but they let you to take this. So I was able to handle that, or this problem didn't show up. So what happened was they said something's very wrong here. They tested me, and it turned out I had a learning disability from a closed head injury. So in other words, it's a TBI. Oh, I'm sorry, traumatic brain injury. So, but it wasn't lacerated. So there's some speculation where it came from. I did not read and write at the level that I should be. Reading comprehension. For instance, I'm talking to you now and I sound literate. But if I was to take, in fact, I did. In order for prep, I have a 13-page document that probably took me 6 weeks to write, because the written communication is it's a deviation. It's like there's a score, like a Bell score. Say you have your IQ mine's like 123 or something. But when I first got tested, I had probably a 7th grade reading level. Now, how in the world did I do military intelligence? I had to read a lot of reports. So there was these little tricks that I learned, like skimming, getting the most important things, and then going back for details, and writing a written document. So it was a godsend. in that I always knew there was something that wasn't, I didn't learn like other people, right? Me opening a book wasn't going to do it. I would sit in a classroom and get just as much information by just listening and taking the information in, gathering everything, and know the information, and I can pass the test. So so what they did was they tested me. I got accommodations and modifications. And so, for instance, me having a textbook that was recorded, so I could listen to it at the same time I'm reading along with it. You can stop it. I had a note taker. I had all these different things, and I was on the dean's list upon graduation. It was just a matter of, but the godsend is that it gave me answers to why I struggled. So I called my mother up and said, "Hey, Mom, guess what? I have a learning disability." She says, "I always knew there was something wrong with you. I just didn't know what it was." I said, "Thank you very much." So, but I also think that it's wonderful the way I think, because I just don't take things for face value. Like, I just did this tour of the campus, right? I wasn't going to let it get in my way that I didn't know my way around. So I figure out different ways to get the information and learn different perspectives from different folks and stuff like that. So that wasn't, nobody taught me that. It was one of those, a tool that I learned to survive without even knowing I needed to survive. So.
What college did you go to?
Augusta State University.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like then?
I liked it. It was totally different. I think if I was to do it over again, I wouldn't do full time. I'd do either 3/4 time or, it's almost like they sent you up for failure. And that could have been one of the things that I do. I could have downgraded. So this is kind of interesting. So military intelligence, basically I was a spy. Okay. So there's not a lot of callings for spies out in the civilian sector. There should be, but there's not. But anyway, so what they do is it's vocational rehabilitation. So they sent me specifically for that, and that gave me more college credits that I had that would take for me to become somebody else after I'm not a spy anymore. So, yeah, they do that a lot. It's a special chapter. It's education.
What did you major in?
I started off in early education, and then when I found out about the learning disability, and I gravitate towards folks who struggle. So I'm always looking after the underdog, or looking even after the troops, right? I take care of my troops. So I switched to, I added special education. Yeah. And so with that, it turns out in order to work with the learning disabled specifically, you had to have a master's degree. And I went to the bachelor's. And then I ended up relocating to upstate New York. I didn't finish my degree in Augusta. We had a catastrophe. Well, I lost my son. He died in a car accident. And so I relocated back home for support. And so I didn't do the student teaching. Probably at some point when I got my stuff together, I should have returned to do the student teaching. But when I finally went back to school in New York, they wouldn't take my credits. A lot of the stuff with the core classes they would take, but special education or early development, they wouldn't take. So it's basically starting from scratch. So I found a college. It was called Empire State College, and I did everything online. It's with the SUNY system in New York State. And ultimately, I got a degree in community human services during COVID. When everybody else was locked down, I was busy completing my degree. So at age 65.
And what have you done with that degree so far?
Nothing specifically. It comes in handy in that working with the veterans folks. So I understand caseworkers and all the bureaucracy on what they do. Even out with the VA, sometimes, let's say, if you file for Social Security disability, that's a whole different program. So it comes in handy working with individuals, like real life situations. Yeah. I'm sorry, but the reason it was on my checklist, I was told in high school that I was not college material. So that's one of the reasons I joined the service. I needed to find, if you're not going to tell me what I can do to my life, I'm going to figure out on my own. So that was one of the reasons I joined the service. So they told me I wasn't college material, and I proved them wrong. I am.
Well, going back to the VA and your organization that you formed, I want to know more about that group and what it is that you guys do and your purpose and what you're most proud of.
Okay. So, as I said with the VA, we did all these alternative, they call them alternative therapies. So, non traditional talk therapy or DBT and stuff like that. So, what we do is we actually start at the beginning of the year and what's our theme. So, we have very elaborate theme this year. 2020, I was going to go out with a bang. 2025, but we do it collectively, come up with it. So the fall of Saigon, there's an anniversary coming up for the 50th anniversary, the 30th of April. And so one of the things I wanted to do, there's a famous book by Tim O'Brien, it's called The Things We Carried. So I'm taking it one step further. The things we carried basically when you're in service, okay, which we carry a lot of different things, and that could be it could be a lot of different things. But what are we carrying now? Physically, emotionally, spiritually, intangibly. Okay, so that's one. Then we have the same exact one, the rise of women in the military. If I'm working so hard on this, I'm going to use it in Arts for Vets. And so we're doing a project on that. And when I say that, I think I can elaborate a little bit. But then we're doing the aging veteran. So you've got these. I got out in 39 and I'm 69 now. And so things are starting to fall apart and the system is not set up for that. Like the smart homes when they're working on housing for the veteran, they're not setting them up as smart homes. Like, are they in the wheelchair? Does it come down when you're cooking? You know, if you're that really needs to be addressed. So we're working on that project, kind of like, I don't know if it'll be a white paper, or I don't know if it'll be that sophisticated. But, and then the other thing is we are us. We are one, I'm sorry. So again, you're not an individual who comes to Arts for Vets. We are one. So there's a whole lot of, at some point I really should put that all together so it's a thesis statement, so to speak. But so how we do that. A lot of what people see is the visual arts, us painting or doing a collage or something like that. But we do drama. So with the Vietnam War, we study different plays. And we actually have a couple of people who wrote plays and wrote a book in our group. And so, but we have a professional drama instructor from Skidmore College, and he's working with us. So we've worked with him 2 times before, but this time we have a set thing where we're working on a program at the end in June. We're going to present something. It'll be very low key, but an hour presentation on something. And so what we're working on right now is you can either do a play that already exists, but in our case, we do creative writing all the time. And so that's what we're pushing for, to take our pieces of writing and turn them into skits. And it's turning out to be quite interesting. So we do drama, and then music is a big thing. I went to a Songwriters with Soldiers workshop, and I had the opportunity to work with professional songwriter Mary Gaucher, and she's famous. And I wrote my own song, but the way it worked out was this. I do this a lot. I piggyback on different organizations. So 8 of us, all women, just happened to be, it was an all-women retreat. All of us were from Arts for Vets. So we did 3 group songs. And since then, everybody wrote their own song with their professional songwriter. But then we had a reunion, and we wrote another song. So I think we're up to 12 songs on the album that we created. And so we're all very proud of every song that we did. My song is called My Name is Penny Lee and I Believe in Me. So when I first sat down with Mary, and she said, "What do you want to write about?" I said, "I want to do a happy song." She says, "I don't do happy songs. Haven't you heard my songs? They're all about, you know." And anyway, so we created this upbeat, and a lot has to do with, it's about me, but it talks a lot about what we do in Arts for Vets. It's a um, I'll get Jason the link, so if you're interested in hearing it. I'm very proud of it. So music, but we can make, it's called passive listening and active listening. So are you dissecting the words, the lyrics to this? Johnny Cash's his lyrics and all the drug abuse, and you get a lot. Sometimes you just listen to it or you're singing along with this, and the message is totally different than what you're even considered. So it's really interesting. So we have music therapists, professionals, like they actually have a degree. So I pay our therapists to come. So it's just not like, but the other thing we are is kind of a co-op. We teach each other. If somebody happens to know a skill, that we'll teach each other on how to do a special project. I have an artist she was an art teacher in school. And so she brings skills in. She just taught us shading, and specifically, a lot of times we just create this kind of stuff. So we do creative writing, drama, music, movement. So that could be dance, or we're going to be creating. I did a thing about, it's an older song, "You Are My Fight" song with, so I actually like punched somebody out. You knew who I was thinking about when I did that, right? But I put what I was feeling into movement. I choreographed my whole, this whole thing. So we use different things. We go to horse therapy. That's huge. It gives you an outlet that you can talk to the horses. Sometimes you don't even have to speak. They just know that you need a hug. We've done it. I personally have done 6 different equine therapies, and not everybody is as crazy about horses as I am. But there was another organization, David Fisher Upper Hudson Heroes. We created. It was 2012 when I first joined them. Now that's a separate organization. But why I bring it up is there was a number of us. Some of these organizations overlap. So it's kayaking. So what we said was we de-stress through paddling. If that's reversing, those letters are reversing PTSD. And so what I liked about paddling, I'm not some, crazy woman. I get on a lake. I have my camera with me. I go to locations I wouldn't physically be able to go capture that beaver dam, and I'm in nature, and I'm present, right? I'm mindful of the situation. So why I bring this up, a number of us were in this organization, and we actually did chili cook-offs, and we bought our own boats and the vests and everything like that. And we lost some of our instructors anyway. It just wasn't able to go on. So just recently, last year, when they decided we had a lot of money, we had a lot of boats, we had the trailer, we had everything. I said to them, listen, a lot of the folks that are in Arts for Vets, can we make a deal, somehow get all this stuff and transfer it over? And so it's not Arts for Vets, but it's Albany County Veterans Service Officer, and we have access to those same boats. So we didn't lose anything. It was a matter of networking, coordinating. I do a lot of that. So did I answer the question? You got a feel for, we do good stuff. We always, we do an art show every year. There was one year where we did 5 art shows simultaneously. So that was a little hairy.
Well, I love your organization and its group and your goal, and I'm very excited to hear your song. I would love to know what you think when we talked about your time in the service and that things hadn't changed and the experiences of women in the service at the moment. What do you think would change the structures then? Because the system needs to change, but how do you think that's going to be done?
This might be that opportunity to talk about this grand idea. Yes. So first of all, I was in the Women's Army Corps. So one of the suggestions I've heard is, well, why don't we go back to that? Segregate the women by branches. Okay, so it was the Women's Army Corps. You had the SPARs that were the Coast Guard women. WAVES were the Navy women, and um, Marines. And they're interesting enough a little behind us. Like it takes them a while to catch on, these Marines. And then there's the Women's Air Force. Okay, but that was all going on simultaneously from 1943 to 1978. They were all kind of doing their own thing, but completely segregated from the male counterparts. Okay, so that's one question: is should we go back to that? Specifically with like military sexual trauma. If you can't keep us safe, maybe we need to be segregated. I don't think that's the answer. That's just going backwards. That's like not addressing the real issue. So someone brought up to me, and it got me thinking that you know how they just made another Space Force? Well, why can't we make another branch where it's run by women and only women in it, but it's not broken down by branches? I don't know what we would call it. We can't just arbitrarily go and do it. I think it's an interesting concept to do some research on to see if it's feasible to make it an option. I'm not saying for the women not to be able to join the other forces. It might be just an option. And the other thing about that is I think it's important for us to really address that the battlefield is changing. The time where we're deployed to a different things and you're using all these ground forces or aircraft or whatever, the whole climate is changing. So I think it would be interesting to figure out different fields that would be advantageous for this group. And I wish I knew the name. We can look it up somewhere along the way. I did ask Jim about it. That in Greek times, there was a woman commander, and she only had women warriors. And have you ever seen a woman scorn? It's something to be reckoned with, right? So if everybody's on the same page and we've got a job to do, I think it'd be kind of interesting to see what happens. It either could be what we call stand up, see if it works. If it doesn't work, 5 years, it stops, whatever. And then they do after action reports and say why it didn't work. But the bottom line is the current climate is not effective. It's like this, who can do combat roles? Well, it takes a lot to have forces, the Department of Defense. It takes the cook, it takes the finance personnel, it takes military intelligence. You do not need to be a lean, mean fight machine on the battlefield or look like Hulk in order to be, you can be intelligent. I think cybersecurity is huge. Drones. There's just so much. We need to be let me see. It's a part of intelligence, but it's counterintelligence where we need to be proactive, looking out, anticipating the next move because it's real. For instance, they could take down a power grid, whoever they are, right? What was that recent thing where the drones were flying around over in New Jersey and nobody wanted to admit that they belonged to us? I said that all along. I said, it's us, you guys. Stop it. Anyway, so.
Well, what do you think? Well, what would you like people to learn from your experiences in the military?
I definitely think people should join. I also think that they should serve. It doesn't have to be armed forces. It could be the Peace Corps. It could be, there's a program, AmeriCorps. It's phenomenal. I had the opportunity to do it for 2 years where you go into the community. It could be inner cities and some service. 2 years, you don't have to do. I personally think we should set something up, and that's probably pretty radical. There's a number of nations that actually transcript that it's mandatory for you to serve in the armed forces for 2 years. I say service of some kind because you learn so much about team building and being something more than yourself. Do we not see how many selfish people there are in the world? So I think that's key. And then Definitely women should join. Don't let somebody else tell you that you can't or shouldn't, or just be smart about it. Be on your
Is there anything, looking back on your career in the military and since college, is there anything that you wish you had done differently or that you reflect on often?
I have a bit of a guilt trip. I don't have the answer, but having children in the military, one of the things the Army will tell you is if we wanted you to have children, we would have issued them to you. So they did not care that you had children. It was up to you to get to PT, physical training in the morning. They didn't want to hear that your babysitter didn't come or the kid's sick. They didn't care. So in my particular case, and I ended up being a sole parent with 2 children on active duty. So I paid out the gazoo for childcare because for one thing, they had to be available 24 hours. Normally my job is 9 to 5, but what happens if I didn't come home? They needed to know that they're going to be taken care of. So, or I might be gone for a field exercise for 3 weeks. I just handed my child over to somebody else. In most cases, they were dependent wives of the soldiers. In a lot of cases, they might have been my soldier. But there was a whole thing about that. So I have a guilt trip on, did I raise my child or did somebody else raise my child? And I can tell you, my daughter said to me the other day, so she's 40 and she has a 7-year-old. She has 1 child. They have 1 child on purpose because it's too much work. There's 2 people in that, a daddy and a mommy, and they can handle 1. So what she said to me, I don't know how in the world you ever did it. You were alone and raised 2 children and got us on the bus or wherever we were going. So I thought that was a great. I did good,
I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with the VA getting healthcare options, and specifically about like feminine healthcare options and how that's progressed through the years. And similarly, on that note, I'd love to hear about your experience with the burn pits in Iraq.
Okay. Remind me about the burn pits. Okay, so the healthcare at the VA, all of my healthcare is done by the VA. Now I'm retired Army, so I am entitled to TRICARE, and I'm now over 65, so I have Medicare. So I'm kind of over-insured as far as health. That's rare for people to, but I'm service connected 100%. And why that's important is there's certain things that aren't available to you if you were only 10% service connected. So in my particular case, for the complex, so for mental health issues alone, so I have complex PTSD, but I also have depression and anxiety, these official diagnoses. And you have to have those criterias. And it took me 13 years to get the diagnosis of PTSD. I started to mention that, how I went to all these rotating through and nobody gave me the diagnosis. So 13 years to get a diagnosis. This is not good. And if you don't have the right diagnosis, then they're not going to treat you correctly using the right therapies, whether it's medication or whatever. And a pill is not the answer. I actually became a licensed massage therapist in order to help myself with all of my issues. So I better understood my body. So in 2012, I went back to school again, and I'm very much into the mind, body, soul connection. If I've got a headache, there's a reason why. What's really going on? Why am I so tense? What can you do about it? And very much into alternative therapies. We talked a lot about that already, but there's many more. So massage. But there's all kinds of massages. Cranial sacral is where it's actually taking your fluid in your brain. That's the spinal fluid that goes in your brain and goes down to your spinal. It's a hydraulic system. So if that system's out of whack, it's going to show up in your body. So I do that kind of massage. Cranial sacral, that's called. And there's different. I've learned so much from that, but with that came all these other alternatives. Acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractor, energy work, Reiki. Our body has these meridians. So this is an Eastern philosophy, Japanese and Chinese philosophies, where we're broken into 12 meridians, like a grid, up and down our body. And so depending on what's ailing you, you might work at a certain point. So it all has to do with Eastern theory. And it made sense to me. It's just like, for instance, let me see. If I'm angry, okay, that means my heart is overloaded. It's got too much. So that's a red, right? So, well, what do you do in order to put out a fire? You have to bring in water, right? So that's a water meridian is another one. So I might work on that particular meridian to calm my heart. I'm a firm believer in all that. So back to, let me see, with the VA. They have a Western philosophy. Okay, so heavy on medication. My current pet peeve, I guess, if anything, with the VA is I currently get massages through the VA, but they will not let you do acupuncture at the same time. They will not let you do chiropractor at the same time. You do 12 sessions as a massage. That's me getting massage, not me giving it. So, but you won't do it at the same time. But they're working on different things. Like a chiropractor, adjusts your spine so that everything connects the way it's supposed to, and massages relax or works on muscles that are too short or whatever. So that's my pet peeve is they have this mentality that one thing at a time. And then it can't be maintenance. It has to be a brand new. They play a lot with these medical terms, like you're going to get fibromyalgia, you're going to get chronic fatigue syndrome, I have sleep apnea. I could talk about that real quick. So I have sleep apnea, but it's complex sleep apnea. So I have to be different. So there's two things. Most people with sleep apnea, they could be heavy. That's for the most part, but there's an obstruction in there when they lay down, right? So I do have that, where I stop breathing up to 20 times a night. Stop breathing. That's not good for your brain. So, but they had a terrible time figuring out the right machine, a CPAP machine, a BiPAP machine, and now I have another one. It's ASU, because I have something called central sleep apnea. My brain is not telling me to take for my diaphragm to expand, for my lungs to take the breath. My brain's not telling. The central nervous system is not telling. So this new machine gives me say if I haven't I'm not breathing, it gives it me. So I sleep very well now. I'm down to like an event an hour. It's phenomenal. It's done. So that also means that if you're getting a good night's sleep, you have better thinking, your mood's better. It's life-changing. And then the burn pits. In my case, I have little capsules inside my lungs, and what they think it is, nobody's dissected me, but is there was fine sand in the desert, and so when you're breathing that in, and we have a protective mechanisms where our lungs actually encapsulate and make little modules out of that. Back to the burn pits. In my particular case, when we got ready to leave, they buried everything in the desert, or we torched everything with the burns. We burned our own feces every day. So that was diesel fuel that we were lighting on fire to get rid of our waste. It was just unsanitary conditions altogether. You're going to war, what can you do? But I used to have really long, like the length of your hair, if not longer, before I went to the desert, and I cut it all off, buzz cut. this is one of my longer haircuts, but because the parasites, the insects, it was hard to keep clean. You did your laundry, you'd hang it out on the tent pole, just a sandstorm come along, and you're putting these underwears on that have grit all over. It's a nasty place. Even if you're not fighting the enemy, just to be there is a nasty place. That's Saudi Arabia. Let me see. Other things from the VA. I I am very satisfied with the VA, only you have to advocate for yourself. They tried to pull stunts on me. Let me see if I'm not going to be politically correct. Sorry about this. Through many of my rotations for a mental health provider, they gave me a male. I'm not saying that I wouldn't work for the male, but there's a lot of things, But anyway, when I first meet him, his last name is Hussein, and he's wearing a turban. I went, "Are you people nuts? Have you not read my chart?" And they said it was ridiculous. They agreed that, like, we're very sorry. They were, like, all over themselves, and they got me somebody. There's no way I could have worked with, Yeah, there's a prejudice there for sure, So I fired my providers when I felt that they weren't listening to me. And I said, no, I'm not working with you. Yeah, you don't care about me. You have to be an advocate. Normally when you go to doctors, my daughter complained about it just the other day. She had 15 minutes for her annual exam to tell what's going on so that they can get the different consults and stuff. When they work with me for my annual, I do it twice a year actually, annually. They know that they have to take an hour with me because I've got too many different things going on. It's not like I'm a hypochondriac. They're legitimate, and they know that it's important to handle everything. I can say that I just recently had a bout with breast cancer, and I'd like to talk about that. Actually, I think it's significant. My daughter happens to be a mammotech. After she got out of the service, she went to x-ray school, then bone density, and now she's a mammotechnician. So she actually does the breast exams. So I recently had a bad mammogram, and so they sent me to have it evaluated. They did all these biopsies, and then they ultimately gave me surgery, which, depending on who you, partial mastectomy or something to do with the lymph nodes. And so they took a piece out of me. Okay, that really gets in your head when you've got a fear of cancer. And what they've told me so far is that they cut all around it and it had clear margins. So they took out all the defected areas. So what I say is I can play golf on my boob. There's this little divot. You just... but why this is important? For whatever reason, and I'm going to give you some of the reasons, there's 30 to 40% more risk of women in the military getting breast cancer than their counterparts. And so my daughter being a mammotech, we talked about the different things. We wear all this gear, this heavy equipment, FAC vests and all this equipment. And so if it's not fitted correctly, basically it's called battle rattle. Because of that, basically you've got, say, 50 pounds, and it's going bang, bang, bang on you, right? So you're getting compressions, and that's not good for your boobs, turns out. Let me see. We are not having children. Maybe they don't have children at all, and that's one of the things that if you have, it's better to have children younger, more children, and breastfeed. So women in the military don't necessarily breastfeed because they got to get back to work in 6 weeks. Right? Or you got to pump your milk, or you got to do all that kind of stuff. We have our careers, and we don't have children to, say, 35, 40. So they're putting themselves at risk, basically. And the other thing that I just recently, with all this going on, is when women deploy, they're actually having them manipulating their hormones. They're having them take some kind of pill, hormone therapy, where it stops the menstrual period. You're messing with people's lives here. When there's a whole cycle, there's a reason why we do the things we do on a monthly basis. So there's a couple of reasons why they do that. The whole thing with, let me see. So they didn't have to deal with the products, bringing the products, right? Interesting enough, you still cycle, you still have your cramps even though you don't bleed, okay? But so it's for convenience of the military. And it's not healthy for these women. But they're now, one of the things I've been told is they're not saying you have to do this. It's a mind game. Well, you don't have to do this, but do you really want to be bothered with all the products that you're going to need to take? We're going to have to supply them for you, right? It's basically a guilt trip, I think. Manipulation. Telling you you're not good enough. You know, we have to do special privileges because of you just because you're a woman. This is the kind of crap.
I'd love to hear how you got revenge on
Oh,
the
yes.
person
Yeah.
who assaulted you.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you like me to keep it running for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did mean to
Yeah.
ask that, actually.
Okay, so I did not report at the time, which would have been 1990. And I was stationed, so we were military intelligence. My perpetrator was also military intelligence. You have top secret clearances in order to hold your field. So periodically, about every 3 years or something, they do background checks. Like FBI kind of people come around and ask these questions. And, or in our case, it was a G2. That was their job. So someone said to me, I was stationed at another location years later, 3 or 4 years later, right before my retirement. So 94 probably, something like that. They said, we noticed that you were stationed with this particular person at this different, at the same time. Would you like to, could you talk about his reputation or something? I said, have I got a story for you? And so I proceeded to tell them. So I laid it all on the line, what happened. And based on that, he did not get his clearance. He wasn't able to have his MOS anymore. He couldn't be, it was imagery. So he couldn't be a 96 Delta anymore. He didn't qualify. So indirectly what happened was, one of the reasons I reclassified was it's supply and demand. Like they're going to promote who's advantageous for them, right? The military. So he didn't get his promotion. So therefore he was kicked out because he ultimately got kicked out because he didn't meet the rank because he became another MOS and didn't meet the criteria. So it was I got him.
That's a good revenge.
That's the last word.
Yeah.
Yep, got the last word.
I'm also curious, actually, what made you want to retire from the military when you did?
Actually, it was a done deal. When I signed up, I knew I was going to be gone for 20 years, that I would retire at age 39 to start my second career. It was all a plan. A senior in high school, I knew what I was going to do. I didn't want to be an old lady in the military, old wrinkled up thing, you know. So anyway, yeah, 39.
You chose to have your children while you were in the military.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about how that was maybe not discouraged per se, but certainly not encouraged. How did that affect your career, and what was it like? What was your reaction?
In my case, it didn't affect my career because I wouldn't allow it. They were second class. Like, my career came first. Major guilt trip. Major. So I'm trying to think. It's very strange. So I was married, and he became a dependent. So everything he did, I was responsible for. And he was a major mess up. It wasn't his fault. He actually turned out to be manic depressive. And so I have horror stories. They're actually very funny. But I have horror stories, and I'm responsible for every action he took. Okay, so kick him to the curb, man. But that means you take it for granted. You take going to I'm going to run to Walmart. All of a sudden, I got 2 kids to take to Walmart. You know, it's so it's it's a lot to raise 2 children by yourself, and then that's everyday life. And then with the military and the mentality and what's expected of you, I'm kind of flabbergasted that I made it through. But you made choices. Like, I paid for the babysitters so that I could, not that I didn't want that beer, but if you didn't go and get the beer, then you weren't one of the boys. Okay? But I paid extra for people to take care of my children. Let me see. But they had a good life. They traveled all over Europe. They loved it, and they were with other people, but those people had children. They were Army brats just like them. So it was like, it's a part of the community. It was a way of life for them. In fact, we still today, my daughter and I both, we get edgy. If we haven't moved within 3 years, we like, it's time to get out of here. We've got to do something different. If it's a matter of moving furniture or redecorating or painting or something so that it looks different. So yeah, you get used to moving all the time. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was it always a part of your plan to have your children during your service?
No. I figured I'd have children sometime, but no, it wasn't a real plan to get married either. It was just, that's kind of interesting in that I was stationed am I still recording? Yeah. Okay. I was my first duty station. So I went to Women's Army Corps in basic training, completely segregated. And then I went to postal school, which was completely different in that not only were we with male and female, but we were with all the branches because we were governed by the domestic mail manual. That's what the post office uses. So all of us from all branches were in that training. And then I go to my first, it's called the Cherry Unit, in Ansbach, Germany, which is the 1st Armored Division. That's an old, like leftover from World War II area. And so literally it's a fort. It's called a concern, but it's a walled city. And so that's where I was stationed, but I worked at the post office. So I met the first husband there. Now, what's interesting about that is armor division has approximately 10,000 men. During that time, of course, it was all males, right? For the most part, it still is. But anyway, so there was 20 women on the post, 20. And I had my pickings of 10,000 men, and I chose the manic depressive. So it's kind of a funny story, but it's I'm sure we're going to run out of time, but the billeting situation. So what they did with us, we had a wing. One wing was segregated. So we were still in the same barracks per se, but we were completely separated. Yeah, during that time frame.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No.
All right, then.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think I'm good.